evening, I'm Leyna Cotran and welcome to ATV. Tonight with me I have Noor al-Ramahi. Noor is an Emirati citizen with Palestinian origins. Her family lives in Abu Dhabi. She is married and the proud mother of two and a half-year-old twin boys. She has a business administration degree with a major in marketing. She was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes at the age of 5. She served as a volunteer at her local hospital in the United Arab Emirates, helping newly diagnosed children and their families. While still living in Abu Dhabi, she volunteered for children with diabetes and continues her work with them for the last 11 years. She is a staff member at the Friends for Life conferences, and she helps manage their social media platforms and marketing. Since moving to the Bay Area, she has volunteered with the American Diabetes Association in San Jose, and she works for a local organization called CarbDM, which provides support and education for people and families living with type 1 diabetes. She's an active member of the Sugar Mamas, a Bay Area support group for type 1 diabetic women in family planning, pregnancy, and motherhood stages. Noor, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Tell me about your childhood, where you grew up, and your family life.
So I was born and raised in Abu Dhabi. I am the second of a total of 5 kids. I have an older sister and 3 younger brothers. Both my parents are originally Palestinian. My mom grew up in Saudi Arabia, and my dad grew up all around. He was born in Jerusalem, and then when the war broke out, they had to leave. And my grandfather was a politician, so they bounced around a lot, and that's how my grandfather got the UAE citizenship. Is he used to work with the ruler back then of the UAE, and he granted him the citizenship because he needed him to work in the embassy in Jordan. So that's where they settled for a while, and that's where my parents met and got married, and then they moved back to Abu Dhabi. We always grew up, we went to school in both British and American schools, and I was diagnosed at the age of 5.
That must have been quite a change for you as a child.
It was, although I didn't really feel the impact of it as much until later on in life. When I was diagnosed, my mom took on most of my care, so I didn't feel like a lot has changed, or at least I don't remember much has changed. My mom did a good job with just making sure that everything remained as normal as possible. It really didn't shift the whole dynamics of the family a lot. She was just great at being strong for me and just for the whole family. And so I really didn't feel the impact of it that much. And even in the eyes of society, I felt like there was more sympathy and worry for me from our community rather than anything else. So they were very supportive, and there was a lot of fear of unknown. You know, I was really young at the time. They didn't know what would happen later on in life, how would it impact me, so a lot of the concern came from that. But yeah, I didn't feel the impact of it until
you were older.
Until I was older and took on more of the responsibility.
So as a child, your mom would she give you shots? Would she actually test your blood sugar?
Yeah, she would do all of that, and I think I was a little bit more mature than my age. That even when I was diagnosed at the age of 5, I wanted to be more involved in my care. Like, I would ask my mom to do my own shots. Of course, she would like draw the insulin for me and like adjust my doses, but I wanted to take on more of my care.
What was it like being diabetic as a teenager?
That's when things started
to shift.
Really to shift.
Right.
Going through the teenage phase is already very tough with or without diabetes. You know, you just want to belong, you want to fit in, you want to be normal, and just throwing diabetes into the whole teenage phase just adds a whole other level of complexity. There's also the hormone changes that happen in your body, which make managing diabetes harder during your teenage phase. And a lot of people, including myself, feel like they're failing at managing their diabetes. Mm-hmm. And it's not because they're not taking care of it, it's just because of the whole hormone imbalancement. which discourages them and just makes them not want to take care of it as well. And I went through that rebellious phase. I wouldn't check my blood sugar. I wasn't taking my insulin. It was just a very, very rough time. I was in and out of the hospital a lot because I wasn't taking care of my diabetes, and that just also strained my relationship with my parents, because I would hide my numbers. I would lie about what I was doing in terms of my health. So it was a very rough time, both for me personally and for the whole family.
Absolutely. And so what brought you to the Bay Area? What got you here?
So that's actually very interesting. I used to always come almost every summer. We used to come either to the Bay Area or to Boston. My dad would bring us every summer for me to get a full medical checkup, either at Joslin or at Stanford. And my sister went to school at Stanford, so we used to come every year when she graduated. And my dad did also some grad programs at Stanford, so I was very familiar with the area, but I never had any intention of moving here. And when me and my husband met in Abu Dhabi, and he used to work for a company called Abu Dhabi Technology Investment Company, and it was owned by the Sovereign Wealth Fund of Abu Dhabi, and they had invested in a semiconductor manufacturing company here. So he was sent as part of the strategy group to help set up the strategy when the company was acquired. And it was supposed to be a 6-month temporary project, and almost 6 years later, we're still here.
Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely. And for him and for your family life, managing diabetes as a mom, you work, you volunteer for a lot of, organizations. You have 2 twin boys who are only 2. How do you manage it all?
I think one of the biggest blessings in disguise that I was diagnosed at such a young age is I don't know life any other way. Everything has become second nature to me. It's like when you brush your teeth or comb your hair, you don't put it on your to-do list. It's not things that you consider that you need to do. So this has just fit in my life. I wake up, I check my blood sugar, I eat, I bolus. Of course, there are times where things get really chaotic and you forget, but it's become more of a habit. So it's very rare that I would forget to do stuff like that.
And you really embrace now diabetes. You're a big advocate for it, and I want to talk all about that. So, tell me how you became passionate about diabetes advocacy. Where did that shift happen for you, and what do you do about it now?
So growing up in Abu Dhabi and just in the Middle East in general, there's like a lot of stigma attached to having a disease, and type 1 diabetes specifically for me. So for the longest time, I always hid it, and I didn't want to deal with it. I just felt very embarrassed, and like people would judge me or view me as less than or damaged or not the way that I wanted them to perceive me. So I just, brushed it under the rug and hoped it would go away and I would just fit in and everything would be normal. But that just backfired big time. Like, I was always sick. I was in and out of the hospital. And at that time, the hospital that I used to go to, they told my parents about a diabetes conference that's held every year in Orlando. It's called the Friends for Life Conference. It's run by Children with Diabetes organization, and they thought that it would be really inspirational and motivational for me to help me get things back on track. And of course I refused. Being a teenager, I didn't want to have anything to do with this. I just did not want to be involved. But my parents insisted that I go, and I went. And we were a group of teens on the way. The conference is held in Disney every year, so we were on the Disney bus going to one of the parks, and this kid who's become one of my closest friends, his name is Kenny. He was like the poster child for type 1 diabetes. Like, everything, like his A1C was in range, he had handle on his control, and he was checking his blood sugar on his forearm. We usually use our fingers.
Yes.
So I asked him, I'm like, why are you using your forearm? He's like, just in case I ever develop complications, I wanna lose vision or lose my eyesight. I want to be able to read Braille.
Oh, wow.
And that was like the life-changing moment for me. It's like, okay, here I am, super uncontrolled, without a care in the world, and here's this poster child who is controlled and is worrying about these complications, although it's very slim.
Right.
So that was that was when I realized, okay, I want to change things, and I started taking better care of myself, and I started to feel better, and just that experience made me want to be more involved. So I contacted the organization, and every year after that, I started volunteering with them. Every summer, I was part of their staff, helping with the youth camp, but it was still never a huge part of my life. Like, it was just a one-time then summer thing, and then I would go back home, and like I wouldn't talk about it in public, and I wasn't married at the time. And although my dad was always proud of the person that I was, somehow when it came to my diabetes, he always felt the need to protect me from society, or how society would perceive me.
Right.
That he wasn't very comfortable with me, like, taking my shots in public, you know?
Right.
So that just made me more self-conscious about it, and didn't want me to be open about it. And just people in general weren't open about it. But then,
Which a lot of that is just the understanding, you
yeah,
know.
there's a lot of misunderstanding regarding diabetes in general, differences between type 1, type 2, and again, the fear of the unknown. It's like, when you're not knowledgeable about a subject, you fear
Right.
the consequences of it. So that was my dad's fear for me. He just wanted to protect me from the way people would view me. But then when he started seeing me become more confident with it, and okay, because I felt so much better, I'm like, you know what, I'm done hiding it. This is me. This is the card that I was dealt. I didn't do anything to get it or deserve it, but I'm gonna make the best of it. And that's when I started feeling better, and I wanted to become more involved and to advocate. And when my husband and I moved here, I still had no intention into going full time into advocacy. Like, I
Right.
had my marketing career,
Yes.
and this was never, like, I never thought of this as being my job or my career or my passion. It was very hard when I first transitioned, because we didn't know anybody here. My husband was working really long hours, so I just felt very lonely. And as a way for my husband to kind of introduce me to the community, he looked up this group on Meetup, and it was a diabetes event. So we went and we showed up, and the founder of the organization was there, and we attended, and she started asking me where I'm from and all that questions, and what are you doing now? And I told her, like, we just recently moved here, I'm looking for a job, like, and she's like, well, we're looking to hire, like, are you interested? I'm like, of course, like,
Right.
this is something that
You know so well.
Yeah, I know so well. It's personal to me. I'd love to make it, like, my career. And so I've been working with the organization. It's called Carb DM for almost 5 years now. And it opened up a whole new world to me. It gave me that more confidence and strength. And I just wanted to show people that you can live life to the maximum, and you can do whatever you have your heart set on, with or without diabetes, you know. And it's just given me so much power, both for me, my life. Just, it's so hard for you to help people when you're not helping yourself. So
Right.
that just gave me direction, and just giving back just makes it so much more powerful. Just seeing the impact that we make in people's life has just been amazing.
And so with Carb DM, you know, what are some of the things that you guys have been working on lately?
So
I know there's events. I mean,
yeah,
I see them.
Yeah, we hold year-long events. So we educate we have both support, like educational support, and just introducing people to each other, like people with type 1 to each other, just kind of community
Building.
building.
Right.
So one of the events coming up in November I've been working on for a while. It's a lifting event for people with type 1 diabetes.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's we've gotten a lot of people wanting to sign up, and it's just been great.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
And I know that you are a member of the Sugar Mamas.
Yeah.
Tell me about the Sugar Mamas.
So
You're one of the most active members of the Sugar Mamas.
yeah, it was a funny story because I met the founder of Sugar Mamas in the bathroom at Stanford Mall. I saw her pump tubing hanging out, and she had a baby with her at the time, and I went through fertility treatment, so that was the 2-week gap before I found out I was pregnant. It was after I finished treatment before I found out I was pregnant. So I knew I needed that kind of support and help and guidance. So I asked her, I'm like, oh, do you have type 1 diabetes? Like, I see you pump. And she was like, yeah. We started talking, and that's how I became involved with a Sugar Mamas group. And a week later, I found out I was pregnant with my twins. So the group has given me a lot of support and really helped me push through the pregnancy. Like, I don't know where I would have been without that group.
Right, and that group has grown quite a lot. I think there's now somewhere between 60 and 80 members just here in the Bay Area alone, which is wonderful, and I know you've been a big part of that. I know you are an advocate for diabetic moms who are in family planning stages and who are looking for fertility, options if things are not easy for them. So where do you stand on that in terms of your advocacy, and what do you do for those communities?
So as I just mentioned, that I went through fertility treatment. My boys are IVF babies, but it has nothing to do with my diabetes. It just happened to happen that way.
Right.
And I think my experience with diabetes and just being strong about it and open about it made me okay and strong about having to go through fertility treatment. I know, especially like in our Middle Eastern culture, people don't talk about that. It's almost as if they're ashamed of it or there is something wrong. And I don't view it as that. Like, if you have a headache, you take Advil for the headache to go away. Right. I couldn't get pregnant. I seek treatment and I got pregnant, you know. So just talking about it shows people that, like, I want to show people that it's okay. There's nothing wrong with it. And it's easier to live your life and lead by example than kind of trying to lecture and educate through talking about it.
I agree.
So when people see, like, oh, she has type 1 diabetes, she's living her life, she's healthy, she's she exercises, she has kids, like, I do everything a normal person would do, and sometimes I'm even healthier than my counterparts who don't have it because I am more aware of my health issues. Like, I eat healthier, I exercise, I do everything. I'm aware of what's going on in my body because I have to. Right. But in turn, it makes me even healthier, where people would take that for granted sometimes. Right. When I was still volunteering at the hospital back home, the clinic called me and they're like, oh, there's this girl who was recently diagnosed. Would you go in and talk to her mom? I'm like, sure. I walked in and the mom looked at me. She was so confused. And I'm like, I'm Noor, I'm here to meet you. She's like, no. I'm like, yes. She's like, Noor has diabetes. I'm like, yeah, I have diabetes. And she's just so confused. She's like, but you look normal. I'm like, yeah. I'm normal. Like, there's nothing wrong with me. It's just my pancreas doesn't work very well.
Right. Are your boys aware that you're diabetic? Do they have an understanding of it at such a young age?
I think they do and they don't. Of course, they're too young to understand the technicality of it, but they see me checking my blood sugar and they ask, and they're like, oh, Mama, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm checking my blood sugar. I need to be healthy. And when I'm low, I have my Dexcom that's linked to my phone and it beeps. So they know the beeps. It's like, oh, Mama, you're not feeling well. Yeah. So they get some aspects of it, and they're very compassionate about it.
That's great.
Like, when they hear the Dexcom beeping, they'll just calm down. They're like, oh, you're not feeling well? Okay. And they'll sit next to me and they'll just wait. So I'm like, okay, I feel better. And
that's wonderful. And so what do you teach them in terms of having compassion for those either with diabetes, other illnesses? I mean, there are many in the world. They'll be exposed to those surely when they're in school. What do you want them to know about diabetes? What do you want them to feel about empathy towards those that have illnesses?
So in general, whether it has to do with people who have illnesses or just people who are less fortunate than us, I generally teach them to walk a mile in another person's shoe. You know, it's like, put yourself in their position. How would you like to be treated? How would you feel in that kind of situation, and treat them accordingly? And surprisingly, for kids their age, they have a really good grasp on that concept.
That's wonderful.
And I just want them to be compassionate and include everybody, you know? It's like I think a lot of people sometimes forget that diabetes or any other illnesses can happen to anybody at any given time. And a lot of people just sometimes shy away from that because they're like, oh, it doesn't impact me, I don't have to worry about it. But I think that's what weakens us as a community and a society in general, is people are very self-involved. It's like, okay, whatever impacts me directly this is what I'm going to focus on. I'll just ignore everything else.
Right.
So sometimes just stepping outside that comfort zone and just learning more, you know, even if it doesn't impact you directly, just ask.
Right.
And don't jump to conclusions, which is what a lot of people do these
Sure.
days. It's like, oh, you have diabetes, like my cat or my grandmother had diabetes.
Right.
It's like, but they're not all the same. You know,
Right.
type 1 and type 2, they're not the same. So just ask, tell
Right.
me more. Like, what is it?
Right. And how has managing diabetes changed from when you were diagnosed at 5 to now being a mom with children? I mean, there's been so many advances. So
Yeah.
if you could compare and contrast, what does that look like?
Well, there's been a huge change in advancement since I was first diagnosed. When I was first diagnosed, there was an old insulin system that you had to take it at a specific time and
Right.
eat specific meals. So our life was very structured, and my whole life revolved around diabetes. And as we progressed, and I would do shots, and then as we progressed, now there are different types of insulin, longer acting insulin that give you more flexibility, and there's also more technology, like there's the insulin pump that I wear. I have the infusion set over here, and then I also have a Dexcom, which is continuous glucose monitor, and it checks my blood sugar. It gives me a reading, a graph every 2 minutes.
Wow.
So it shows me trends, and it just lets me lets me build my life around diabetes rather than diabetes controlling my life.
And I think that's so important.
So yeah, it's giving me so much flexibility, and really there is nothing that I can't do because of my diabetes.
I think that's amazing. And you're hooked up, you're proud to be hooked up.
Yeah.
Definitely a big change and probably tighter control.
Yeah.
So do you have advice for other Middle Eastern families who may have a child that's newly diagnosed with diabetes? It's unique, but it's still not uncommon. You know, you're not the only one Middle Eastern person in the world that has it. You know, there are other families who are going to be dealing with how society perceives them and the stigma around being diabetic. But what would you tell those families, if they have a newly diagnosed child with diabetes?
Seek support. Like this is one of the biggest things that helped me. Seek support, find a community that will help you and inspire you and show you that really there is no limit to what you can do.
Right.
There's anything, you can do anything. And I think one of a lot of parents' biggest fears, including mine, was not being able to find a spouse that would accept you and your baggage.
Right.
And I just want to let you know that there are people out there who do not see this as an obstacle or hindrance or anything.
Absolutely, and you and your husband are a great example of that.
Yeah, and also having kids, like women can have kids, like the Sugar Mamas group. There's so
Right.
many kids all around us, and I had twins. Doctors, like, people think there's issue with carrying one baby. I carried two with diabetes.
And what was pregnancy like for you, being diabetic?
Pregnancy, it was definitely a lot more work and planning, but it wasn't something that wasn't doable. It's very doable, and doctors are more in tune with your care when you are pregnant. So you have more doctors visit. You see them like weekly or bi-weekly. So I think that's also like the silver lining in that is there's more care that goes into it, so you can pick up on anything that could possibly go wrong regardless of diabetes. You know, if there's any issues, because you're in the clinic so often, you can see that. And also just having all those extra ultrasounds, you get to see your baby, and like by the time it was there, I felt like I knew them. You know, it's like, oh,
right.
I saw you every week growing. So that was really,
must have been wonderful. And you know, there's a stigma that diabetics can't have any sugar, you know, any sweets. I mean, what's your response to something like that?
We can eat whatever we want.
Yeah.
Like, it's really a balancing act. You balance how many grams of carbs, which is how you measure sugar, with the insulin you take. Of course, it's more complicated than that. You need to factor in stress and exercise, but pretty much that's the basics of it.
Wonderful. Well, I want to thank you so much for coming today. That's it for us tonight, but you know, to help us understand what type 1 diabetes is about, I think your work in diabetes advocacy is amazing, and we definitely are supportive and very proud of you at the AACC. This was great to have you here today. I'm Leyna Cotran. Thank you to our sponsors tonight. Thank you for having us. Good night. You did so well.